I mean, it's all like artisanal, the quality is there, and there's a certain sense of, for me, like movement, like energy, like music. I was a New York-based fashion stylist for almost 30 years. I worked for everybody back in the day, like Victoria's Secret, Bloomingdale's, Saks, Lord & Taylor. I mean, so many stores that aren't around anymore because of the way retail has gone. But that being said, I had a store on Martha's Vineyard that was, at the time, like 25 years ago, was antiques and artwork. And the antiques market started to kind of disappear, and I just had this sort of Newton's apple thing, like, oh, fashion, because that's what I'd been working in for so long. So I would have like antiques and a display of pickles and then a Vivienne Westwood like $2,000 dress. So it was sort of a little oddball-y. I years ago adopted a third kind of a unisex symbol. So I have male, female, male sign and a unisex symbol on my sign, and it's pretty subtle, but it's meant to express that a lot of these clothing pieces are unisex, and it's awesome for me to sell like some dude something and then some 70-year-old woman the same thing, but it just comes out totally different. And I was on my porch, and this kid, it was a boy too, like he goes, Mom, that's that sign, you know what, that's like Dylan in school, you know, like and I was like, all right, kid, you know, like he gets it, because that's so much a part of like life now in school. I mean, you can't get away from, like, most kids have some sort of a transgender classmate, if not 2 or 3, and that's pretty incredible, I think. So yeah, I really like collaborating with people. It's a funny thing, you don't want to ask somebody to reinvent their whole wheelhouse. It's like inspiring someone to try something and push something that they're doing in a, you know, another direction to make something new, and but still holding true to their brand and my brand. There's a certain diversity upstate that I really love, because people are coming up here to get away. So we're kind of, a lot of us are sort of New York expats living upstate. So.
So I'm a fiber artist, and I started my business about, I would say, 10 years ago. So I went to undergrad and did creative writing and studio art, and then graduated and went to the city and worked at the Whitney Museum of American Art for a couple years. And I got 2 MFAs together. So one was in poetry, creative writing, and the other was in studio art, focusing on book art and paper. Sort of thinking of the poem as something that exists outside of the page. So what would it feel like if you could really experience walking through something that would make you feel like a poem does? I was making these installations of sort of rooms made of paper that you could walk between, and they would sort of breathe with you as you moved. And I just kept wanting to make them more visceral, more tactile, and I found through that and through experimenting with paper making that just fiber and textile was really an entry point for me to get that emotional connection with the viewer. I make fiber art that's inspired by sort of processing trauma. So a lot of my work is either physical representations of how the body holds or manifests trauma, or landscapes where the body is noticeably absent. I myself am a survivor of sexual abuse and assault, so it's important for me to use my art as a way to hold these conversations and create a safe space to process what it means to heal from that, and what it means to find your sense of self after that. So I'm inspired creatively a lot by history. I use my work to, when I'm talking about women healing from trauma, I often look to the past for examples or times when women were persecuted for their bodies or just because of being women. So while that doesn't happen quite today, there's still a big problem we have in our society with things like sexual abuse, assault, harassment happening way too frequently. So the past is rich for using it as a lens to examine the way women have been treated and are continually treated. As a lot of artists and makers probably feel, there's a lot of pressure to do or make work that feels like it would fit right into the conversation that already exists. But from early on, I tried to stay weird, I guess, and keep pushing myself and do the work that I really wanted to see out there. And there were definitely some bumps along the way, but I think by staying true to that, it really helped me stand apart. I love the Hudson Valley. It's a great place. I lived in the Boston area, the Bay Area, New York City, and while they all have their charms and pluses, I think the Hudson Valley is a place where, as an artist, I've really been able to have a studio and be able to, one, afford that, but two, really make waves in this community. Also, there's so many other creative people that have moved here because they want space and time and connections with people where they really feel like they can have an impact. They move here because they're kind of like authentically themselves too. Like most of the people I come into contact with, other artists or makers, like there's no preamble. It's just kind of like they just show up as they are. So whether it's whatever it is they're doing, they just kind of do it unabashedly, and I love that sort of just authenticity that seems to be so tied with Hudson Valley.